Hi everyone, I'm Sayel Filias, the Programs Learning and Development Specialist at CEREC. And on behalf of all the CEREC team, I would like to welcome you back for our follow-up webinars with Tannis, Goddard on remote services for career practitioners. Last week's webinar has created a lot of great conversation and questions. So thank you for those who were live with us then, and welcome to those who are joining us live for the first time today. Today's webinar is a bit different because it's a 30-minute follow-up conversation with Tannis, where we will address as many of your questions as we can, including some that we didn't have a chance to answer during last week's Q&A. Of course, you can continue asking your question to Tannis today by using the question box you see on your screen, and we will address your question at the end of today. If during today's webinar you have technical issues, please try refreshing your page or try using the Google Chrome browser if you experience a frozen screen. However, if you wish to watch this webinar again, be reassured that we will also send you the recording later today. A reminder also that at the end of today's webinar, you will have a pop-up windows with a short survey for you to share your future learning needs with us. Thank you to those of you who have already shared your answer last week, and thank you in advance to those who will do so today. But now, let's not wait any longer to start the conversation with Tannis. So over to you, Tannis.
Good morning. It's lovely to join all of you again on this lovely Thursday. I really enjoyed my time with you last week and all the wonderful connections that I've made since that week. So thank you for all of you who've reached out to me via email, via LinkedIn. It really demonstrates that this is a really important conversation for us to be having as career practitioners in Canada and beyond, and that it really is our opportunity to rethink, reshape how we approach delivering services virtually and online to our clients as we transition into the new normal of COVID-19 and beyond. So we had an opportunity to go through the wonderful questions that many of you submitted last week. And I'm going to take about 20 minutes and try to address in broader terms some of the themes that came out of the questions that you shared with us. So the first theme that I'd like to look at is the differing abilities, access, and skill. There were many questions related to concerns about lack of access to technology, different skill levels, and just what to do about that situation. So I'd like to kind of context this and challenge us to think about our role as practitioners and the social justice responsibilities that we hold. I think that at this moment in time, we have a huge opportunity to advocate on behalf of our clients and the technical needs that they have. So I would encourage you, if you could, to devote a half an hour a day to reaching out within your local communities, your local provinces, states. Reach out to your politicians and explain the circumstance. Now more than ever, the need for and demand for career and employment services is undeniable. And I think this is an opportunity for us to advocate and to really push the need to create opportunities and access to technical services for clients. I encourage you to work with your local MLAs. I've heard locally here in BC, MLAs saying that their offices are a safe spot for people to access resources. So find out if your clients can access computers at your local MLA office. It's not a full solution, but I think it is our time and our opportunity to be very vocal and share that information. In the meantime, a couple of tips that I can offer you in terms of working with clients who may not have access to technology or the skills to use it. Don't be afraid of using paper packages and landlines. I want you to consider the context of the work you're in with your client and what do you think the resources and information are they need. So rather than thinking about your work with a client as a session by session interaction, think about what you're going to need to do with them over a 2 or 3 week period. Print out materials, put them in an envelope, send them to your client, send a blank schedule within that, get on the phone and plan out your next 2 or 3 weeks of interactions with your clients. Maybe send them a self-addressed stamped envelope so they could return materials to you if you're not able to interact by email. Also, in terms of clients that are able to use smartphones, I want you to think about just some different approaches you could use with that. Google's G Suite provides a range of tools that has smartphone apps, as well as all the popular video meeting tools such as Zoom, Google, GoToMeeting also have phone-based applications. So you can be working on your desktop and a client can be interacting with you on their smartphone. So it would require you to take some time to make sure your client knows how to set up the app on their phone. You might need to walk them through that, but there is accessible ways. So those are a couple of just suggestions I can offer in relation to a lack of technical access. There were also a number of questions related to clients with disability. And so one of the first things I'd like to suggest is that your first interaction, if you're working with a client that has a disability, is to really gather their learning needs. They know better than anyone else how they've been able to navigate learning in the past, work in the past, interact with people. So take time up front to really find out what tools work for them, what they've been able to do, what possibilities there are, and how you might be able to intervene and support. So don't make assumptions about what the learning needs are. Really clarify with your client. I also think that front loading your work with clients, particularly with clients with disabilities, can be helpful. It takes preparation, but that would involve you printing out materials, packaging things maybe as a digital solution that clients could have access to prior to a meeting. That would allow them, if they needed to use a screen reader, they would be able to do that. Something else to be aware of when you're sending clients information is that PDFs are not reliable with screen readers, so you're better off to use Word documents for clients in that situation. You could also take an opportunity to look at Google Chrome extensions. They offer a number of different opportunities to adjust how the screen is used, and you can search the extensions by topic to see if there's resources that might fit for a particular disability a client might have. For example, there's an extension called Helper Bird, and it's an extension that provides support for clients with reading differences like dyslexia. So they could add that to their browser and be able to make changes to websites to be able to read a little bit more clearly. There were also questions about supporting new immigrants. Something else to explore with them is what type of maybe perhaps translation software they're currently using. Are there ways that you could support them by engaging with translation software? So that's a few thoughts about some of the themes that came out with differing abilities, access, and skill. I'd like to also follow up on themes related to operations and strategy. There were a number of questions and comments related to the use of technology and the storage of data. What we recognize is many of the tools that are available to us do in fact store data outside of Canada. And as I mentioned last week, I think what's really important as step one is for you to know organizationally, based on funders of your contracts, what are your requirements related to data stored inside and outside of Canada? I think that this time and place is going to be changing. Some of the approaches we take with storage of data, so talk to your funders, find out what's possible, what's not possible. Certainly what I would recommend if you are storing any private data outside of Canada, that there is a consent form that you provide to clients that informs them of where your data will be stored and gets their permission for that storage. Another thing to consider for privacy and security, again, as I mentioned last week, but I'll state it again, is consider the potential of using tools and supports to deliver your content, to create interactive activities, and keep your communication, your one-to-one and your group communication with clients via email, via phone, or via whatever web platform your institution sanctions. There was a really interesting question about how to check identification at a distance. It prompted my team and I to have an interesting conversation about that. We kind of played with different ideas, things that we did in the past, and I really don't know a great solution to that question. A couple of ideas is maybe if you've got a secure location with a mailbox, you could have a client take a photo of their ID, put it in an envelope, and put it into your mailbox at a location. And then I guess alternatively, your best option is to be on the phone with a client if you need to collect a SIN number, for example, to put into a database. and ask them to provide that to you on the phone and enter it directly into the database as you're speaking to them, and letting your client know that you're not writing it down on a piece of paper. Remembering we're all working from home as well. We don't want to have the risk of any client data around us. So that finding a way to use the phone to submit it, I think is maybe your best option. There's an interesting movement you can look up on the internet called Good ID, and it's really looking at all the digital questions about how we're shifting and adapting ID processes online. Another area of question and conversation that came up in the questions was the idea of how to blend services and optimal length of services. And I think that the answer lies in the context of the service being provided. I would encourage that as we're shifting methods and models, we have to also rethink time. So if we were used to the idea of having a 3-hour face-to-face career workshop, I would encourage us not to take that 3-hour face-to-face workshop and turn it into a web learning session. I would encourage us to think back to the pedagogy model we talked about last week, this particular model, and think about what if that 3-hour workshop is some content you can create in PowerPoints, in Word documents, to get out to the clients early, to let them have a chance to reflect on, to think about what activities can they be doing to make this meaningful. And then when you're going into your web meeting, really thinking about how you can use the web meeting to either reinforce aspects of content, speak about something in greater depth, or afford and offer opportunities for interaction. So there is no sort of clear line on exactly what we should or shouldn't be doing with clients in terms of timeframes, but I'm going to encourage us to rethink how we really are approaching it. There were also questions about how to support clients as they juggle from home, working with children, and that's where I would encourage you to consider in your service models integrating asynchronous solutions as well. So that's the things that clients can work on, such as content and interaction with you, writing you an email at times that are appropriate for them. They may be very busy with their children during the day, but it might come 8 o'clock at night and they might be ready to sit down and think about their situation and their circumstances. There were also questions about social media, ethics and approach of social media. I was, reflecting quite a bit on this and looking at some of the literature that also exists on that. And at the end of the day, for me, if I was practicing with clients right now, I would use social media as an effort to reach out to extend our services to people, to let them know that there are services. And I'd be using it potentially as a way to communicate information, share content, might be even talking about, how do we navigate careers in the time of COVID-19. So I would use it as a tool to communicate out, but I wouldn't use it as a tool to communicate with clients at this time. I think that it's, a lot of clients aren't as savvy as they need to be to know what they can do. And so at this time, I would really focus on using it as an information sharing. And the third theme that we looked at from your questions was there were a number of requests for examples and tools. And I know when we start to talk about all the different technologies that exist, the first thing we all want to do is see examples, see how it's being used. And obviously in the scope of this webinar, there wasn't a lot of capacity to do that. So you may have noticed in the reminder email that Cyril and Cyril sent out yesterday that we offered a link to our website. So over the course of the past week, we've been gathering some examples of work that we've done in the past, small bits of tools and learning objects that we've put there for you to have a look at. What we've also done is we've taken the tools that we shared in the webinar and put them onto an interactive map that overlays the pedagogical model. And so you'll have a chance to go into that and you can click on the tools and it will ground you in terms of where the tools might best fit when you're thinking about either building content, creating interactions, or creating activities. And that particular map that you'll be able to find on our website was built using ThingLink, which is one of the tools that we talked about last week. So it will give you a chance to see that particular tool live and available to play with. Another question that came up around tools was that whole idea that we talked about creating a container, that we have a spot for clients to go where they can find the resources that they need, whether that's links to live meetings, whether that's links to content, whether that's links to a schedule of when they're going to have interaction with you. And there are many, many ways for you to create that container. Somebody asked if you could, could we create a private page on our website and put information there? Of course you could. What I'm going to encourage is don't put too much pressure on yourself right now. Stay simple. Start where you're at. A nice, attractively laid out Word document, organized, letting people know where they need to be, where they can access information, when their meetings are, would be a fantastic first step. Trying to make things easy so that clients aren't lost and looking for information. There were a few questions about the tools and subscriptions, and were these free tools or were they paid subscriptions? Yes, in most cases they are paid subscriptions, and as I'm sure all of you know, when you're looking at different tools, there's different levels and layers, and so it's really important when you're looking at a tool and considering a subscription to study those layers. Often as you move up in cost, unfortunately, you will find greater privacy tools, other things such as that. So take the time to look at the different subscription levels. There were questions specifically about the presentation, our physical presentation that we did last week, and what tools we used in it. It was completed. Our presentation was in PowerPoint. It used the feature of Zoom in PowerPoint. If you're not familiar with that, that might be something you want to look at. And something we also talked about was the fact that PowerPoint can integrate with Microsoft Forms. And so in fact, you can do number of interesting things with PowerPoint to create interactive tools. And so there were also questions about who makes my wonderful presentations. Well, our presentations are a team effort with my colleagues, Jane Schmidt and Mariana Braga. Mariana Braga is an absolute genius with PowerPoint, incredibly avid learner, and finds all sorts of really interesting ways to present information. So it is a team effort, and I'm pleased to work with my group. There were questions, sort of the last comment I want to make today before we open up to further questions. There were questions about motivating clients in times of COVID-19. And I was really thinking about that. And from my perspective as a practitioner, I think that it's really important to speak to the heart of our clients, recognize the fear, the needs, and try to build up relationship and support with your clients. Use the language that you understand that it's fearful, that it's scary, that it's hard to focus, and that you're there to be there with them, to find different ways of communicating, to find different ways of connecting, and to find ways to support them. I think it's really important to remind clients that they can use this time to connect. They can connect with themselves in a different way. Particularly if they're unemployed, they have an opportunity to really reflect on what matters for them and how they're going to go forward, how they're going to transition and pivot as the industries change. It's important that they feel like they can mobilize, help them find the resources that they are eligible for. There are many aid packages, many relief packages. I think it's really important in our field that we're on top of that we understand it, and we can help clients navigate towards that we know where there are free and low cost services, that we can help them find their way as we're growing through this, and encourage them to use this time to grow, learn a new skill, find a new passion, keep themselves engaged, get off the Netflix, and find productive things that will help them grow. So I'd like to close my interactions, formal interactions with you over this webinar series, quoting our BC Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, who has guided our province through this situation in an incredibly leaderly way. And she closes every press conference that she has with us, telling us to be kind, be calm, and be safe. And so I wish you all, my wonderful colleagues across Canada and the globe, incredible opportunity to refine your practice in new ways using remote skills while we're being kind and being calm and being safe together. Thank you so much, everyone, for the time that you've invested in the webinar series and thinking about your clients and challenging yourself to do things differently. Please feel free to reach out to me at any point. I loved all the messages I received on LinkedIn last week, so please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll keep this conversation going. And as career practitioners, we'll lead the way for how to really integrate effective virtual services for our clients. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tannis. Thank you. You addressed a lot of last week's question. Thank you very much. I'm sure people appreciate it. Okay, so let's have a look of the questions we received today, and I will try my best to select those that you haven't already addressed. So let's start with Jane. Jane is asking, do you have any suggestion for good online career assessment available at no cost?
That is an area I don't have a strong recommendation with. It's not something I've looked at recently. And so anything I'd pull out of my mind at the moment would be a little bit random, but I'm happy to look a little bit further after the seminars and put something on my LinkedIn with any recommendations that I can have.
Sure, thanks. Okay, Derek is asking, how can we know if the tools we are using will be accessible to our clients with disabilities?
That's a fantastic question, and one that I grapple with every time I look at a tool. So a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think one of the first things is don't be frightened to contact the tool manufacturer, the producer. I think that everybody that is creating materials for the web knows that there are web accessibility guidelines. So I would start by reaching out. Usually they have a chat bot, and explain that you work with clients with multiple and varied abilities, and ask them to walk you through what and how their tool is accessible, in what forms, what ways they've built the tool to be accessible, and how it works with other technologies such as screen readers. I would also encourage, as I said earlier, work with your client. You know, your clients will understand their unique abilities best, and ask them to test the tools. So I don't feel like we don't need to feel like we have to be the expert in all of these areas. It's a massive undertaking. So engage your client as the ally to help them check tools, test tools, so that you can see that it works for them, and through that process you will grow and continue to gain knowledge with whatever tool you're using, and how it interfaces with different disability supports.
Thank you, Tannis. We received a couple of questions. Maybe something that you can clarify. I think you mentioned something earlier about the website for the ID verification. Would you mind just to repeat maybe the ID website that you recommend?
Oh yes, it's not a website. I'm just looking for the hashtag here that I had written down to make sure I.
Yeah, no problem.
Right one. No, it's a movement around sort of a broader movement around checking the whole idea of electronic ID, and there is a website, and it's called Good ID, GOODID, and then there's a hash. You can check it on social feeds, hashtag Good ID. And there isn't a direct solution there, but if that's something that is of interest and you're trying to understand, our team found it an interesting source to just start to really think through what are the opportunities, what are the challenges that are happening as a society, as we digify essentially our ID, whether that's from passports to many other things. So it's a starting point to just kind of get one's head around it. It's definitely not a solution or a tool for a solution.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that, Tannis. We got another questions. Yeah, Melissa is asking, what strategy would you recommend for capturing and engaging new clients?
So I think that step one is how are we marketing to clients, using our social media, making sure that we're being clear that we're open, that we have services. And I think it's really important that as we're doing our marketing, we're clear. We don't, as I said last week, we don't just say, well, call us for information and for service, but actually letting them know, here are the different ways you can reach out to us. You can email us, you can phone us, you can connect with us on email, whatever the mechanisms are you're making available. So make it really clear how clients can reach you. I think that whatever medium they reach out to you in should be the initial medium you respond back to them, and invite them for their feedback. Would you like to have a phone call? Would you like to get onto a web meeting? I think being very clear with your whatever web meeting software you're using to know how to send them just a simple link to get onto it, that they don't need to download software, that they don't need a heavy technical solution. So I think keeping that first interaction through light mediums of communication is really important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tannis. I have a question from Lisa. She's asking, in the case where the client I work with have to do writing exercise, do you have example of method that could be more suitable for online practice?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I'm just trying to think of sort of the best examples. I think that what's important is setting the content. So giving the client some information and then asking them reflective questions, asking them, when you think about this, how does this apply to your current situation? How do you feel about that? Asking them open-ended, reflective questions to prompt their writing is really important. I think that if you go onto our website and some of the materials that our team has loaded up, you'll be able to see an example. We put a very small learning module, a small self-assessment, job search self-assessment piece of learning up. And if you go through that, you'll see sort of how we're weaving together the idea of having some content, asking reflective questions. There's a downloadable activity, giving clients more space, giving them a visual graphic where they can make notes and jot things in. So I think it's really us being thoughtful as practitioners on how we're framing questions to make it productive and easy for the client to write back.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tannis. Lisa is asking, I was wondering about the Bob digital portfolio that was recommended in last week's presentation. Is it a method you use to communicate with clients, or is it a forum for sharing resources?
I would see it more as a forum for sharing resources, sort of that idea of a container. One of my teammates had found that software and flipped it to me a couple weeks ago. And within 15 minutes, I had a little website, or the portfolio or a little mini website made. It's a wonderful tool for organizing information. You can put information about yourself. You could organize, depending on the context of how you're working with your clients, you could organize your materials in different folders. So I would definitely see it as a way to organize information, but within that, you could even create one portfolio per client. You could create it per group. If you created it per client, within that, you could use that opportunity to create links to meetings. You could create links to other resources. So it can be a facilitator of communication. I don't know if I would use it as my communication center, but I think it's a wonderful tool to use as a hub to coordinate information and then link your clients to the other resources and tools that you're using.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tannis. And that was the last question for today. You did an amazing job answering as many questions as we called today. And thank you all for your great engagement. Tannis, it was a real pleasure to have you doing those webinars with us. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and it's always a pleasure to partner with CERIC. You do wonderful work in the community, and I'm honored to have been able to share a little bit of my my research and my knowledge that I've gleaned over the years with so many wonderful practitioners. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tannis. It was a real pleasure. Okay, so now before leaving, you may want to continue your learning journey with other webinars, and I'm happy to share some new one happening next week at CERIC. We are going to have 2 free webinars where we will discuss how we can support our students in this current time. More particularly, we will have a webinar on May 13 with Lauren Goddard and Caroline Osler on a practical outcome-based approach to discuss remote experiential learning. On May 15, we will discuss the benefit of a gap year for students as a way to address educational disruption with Michelle Dittmer. And finally, you can still get access to the recordings of our very popular webinars on the career theories that we recently did with John Wooden from Australia and David Blusting from US. So please visit our website at ceric.ca/webinars for more information or to register. And don't forget to subscribe to our webinar news to stay informed of new learning opportunities. Now, please don't forget to share your feedback and future learning need with us in the survey that will just pop up on your screen. And let me now close by thanking you once again, Tannis, for having done this webinar with us, and thanking you, the participant, for your wonderful engagement. Have all a great day and see you at another learning opportunity.